No one can deny gun violence has spiked during the pandemic. What to do about it? That's where things get messy. Activists got a big win last year when Portland disbanded its controversial gun violence reduction team.
I feel like our voices are being heard.
But now the city is bringing it back. Sort of. I mean, it's got a different name.
Today, we are announcing the formation of an enhanced community safety team.
But is it really different? We've been trying all week to get answers on why adult care homes in Oregon can't get vaccines.
They're the people that are at the most risk.
So today, we took it straight to the governor and the Oregon Health Authority.
What do you say to these people? There are 1,200 facilities still waiting who really feel left behind in this process.
Here's the story.
In case you didn't catch it, and she's going to be so annoyed that I'm telling you this, that was Kristen Severance asking that question to the governor, and she demanded that state officials let her get that question in before the press conference wrapped today. It was awesome. You'll hear what happened in a second. In the meantime, welcome to the story. Without Dan Haggerty, I'm Maggie Vespa, and Dan, checks notes, is human, and we're all frankly exhausted after this week, so he's just getting some much-needed R&R. Don't worry, he'll be back on Monday, and all the ways to contact us are still up and running. You can see them at the bottom of the screen. Just email the story at KGW, reach out on Twitter with the hashtag HeyDan, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, via carrier pigeon. We don't care how you do it. We just seriously want to hear from you. It drives this show. And we think that you'll have a lot to say tonight, especially. So with that, let's get started. All right, 3 words at the top of the big story: defund the police. Big words over the summer after the death of George Floyd, and Portland heeded the call, historically so. The city, you'll remember, cut millions from the Portland Police Bureau's budget. And as part of that, they kind of took care of another PR issue. They defunded and disbanded the gun violence reduction team. That was the name at the time. It focused on, you guessed it, gun violence. Sounds simple enough. The problem is, people called it racist. You'll hear why in a bit. What you should know first, though, is that the gun violence reduction team was not always its name. Years ago, it went by a different name, the gang enforcement team. That, for reasons you'll hear why in a bit also, was also deemed racist. Hence the switch. All right, so after multiple names and a flat-out cancellation of anything like it last summer, a team of officers aimed at stopping gun violence is hitting the streets in Portland again. They actually hit the streets yesterday. And this new unit comes with, you guessed it, a new name. It also comes with a new price tag and a new rationale. And that's where we'll start tonight.
Shootings have spiked in Portland. Big time. The numbers are clear. Last month, the city saw 103 shootings. In January of last year, there were less than half that.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Heads at the Portland Police Bureau say something had to be done. So at the command of Mayor Ted Wheeler, a new unit has hit the streets.
Today, we are announcing the formation of an enhanced community safety team.
The Enhanced Community Safety Team, which will focus on curbing the spike in shootings.
We hope to, in the work of this team, to narrow our focus in these investigations to what we think is really a small group of repeat shooters who are responsible for an oversized proportion of gunfire incidents.
Deputy Chief Chris Davis was blunt. The Bureau has a tough road ahead PR-wise. That's for a couple reasons. We'll start here. In the midst of the protests over the death of George Floyd, Portland City Commissioners last summer voted to cut the police budget by $15 million and disband the gun violence reduction team. This after an audit found the team disproportionately stopped black drivers. The mayor last summer said the unit needed to go, but hinted something would replace it.
Gun violence remains a serious issue in the city. We had over 400 shootings in the city of Portland last year. And we still need that investigative function.
Not long after that, shootings spiked in Portland, as they did in cities across the U.S. Fast forward to this week, the Enhanced Community Safety Team has already hit the streets. The deputy chief says one big difference between this unit and its predecessor, this one will focus on getting community input from the neighborhoods most impacted by gun violence.
We're going to have continued trust issues.
Cameron Whitten is the CEO of Brown Hope and a longtime activist in Portland. Before this interview, he had just gotten off the phone with a Portland City Commissioner to talk both about the history of this new unit and another problem: money. Deputy Chief Davis noted this new team is made up of 21 sergeants, officers, and detectives already employed by the Bureau. But the difference? They'll be on call pretty much all the time. And that's expensive. So the Bureau will be asking the city to reinvest somewhat to make this happen. The best estimate, David said, $350,000 per year. Whitten was blown away by that.
This was the week where 11 police officers were sent to protect a dumpster full of perishable food outside of Fred Meyer's. It raises a lot of questions, and it again shows this disconnect between the Portland Police Bureau and the needs that are impacting the community.
All right, so it's worth noting Mayor Ted Wheeler, who's also the police commissioner, did not join that press conference today, but he did put out a statement. He says he is deeply impacted by the shootings in Portland, adding immediate action is needed. Now, regarding the funding issue, he didn't address that, and I emailed his office. They just said this statement stands. That did not address that issue. That said, it is sounding like discussions on this among city officials have been minimal, because I reached out to every single sitting city commissioner to ask if they would support the $350K it would take to keep that team running. The first one to write back was a rep for the newest commissioner, Mingus Mapps, and they told us they can't comment yet because, quote, we literally just found out about this. Sounds like budget talks will be interesting. We'll keep you posted.
Less than a year after Portland disbanded the gun violence reduction team, the city is forming a new unit with the same focus. So how did we get here? Before it was the gun violence reduction team, it was the gang enforcement team. Pretty self-explanatory. Back in March 2018, an audit into the unit found it was disproportionately targeting black Portlanders during traffic stops and wasn't necessarily focusing on suspected gang members. So that fall, the Police Bureau rebranded the unit into the Gun Violence Reduction Team. It included the gang team, but also the Metro Gang Task Force and the Gun Task Force. Basically, instead of focusing on gangs, the team would take on all gun violence in the city. In May of 2019, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty urged the police chief at the time, Danielle Outlaw, to scrap the team. She wanted to direct the money to the Fire Bureau and Parks and Rec, and she wanted to put the gun violence team back on patrol. Days later, Chief Outlaw defended the unit and pointed to statistics suggesting it was having a positive effect. But last June, amid protests over the death of George Floyd and police brutality, the city decided to disband the team. However, since then, shootings have spiked. Granted, that trend is mirrored in most other major U.S. cities. Still, the Bureau is now forming the Enhanced Community Safety Team. And that's how we got here.
Okay, let's talk now about the vaccine and the thousands of people in the 1A group still wondering when they're going to get the shot. And we're talking specifically about the 1,200 adult foster homes in Oregon who were really left out of the plan. Thankfully, Kristen Severance has been metaphorically and sometimes literally banging her head against a wall every single day this week. And Kristen, it's been so frustrating, but you finally got some answers, right?
We finally have some answers, Maggie. I was fully committed to just doing stories on this every day until we got some clarity, and we got some today on why these adult foster homes have not been vaccinated yet. The state basically blamed the CDC for this. We first told you Monday how Gina Roberts was set up to get her residents at a place to call home in Tigard on February 10th, the vaccine through a CVS mobile clinic. Then CVS canceled and has not said if they're coming back, leaving people like 95-year-old Ray and 76-year-old Carol on oxygen without many options. Many of the residents are bedbound and can't leave their homes to get the vaccine. I learned more than 1,200 of these adult foster homes are in this same situation. These are small facilities run out of people's homes. And then, Maggie, you said it, this entire week I tried to find out answers on, how these adult foster care residents can get the shot. I talked to the Department of Human Services, DHS, Oregon Health Authority, the governor's office, county health departments, and no one could say when these people could get the vaccine. So today I asked the governor and OHA's Pat Allen in a news conference why these people were left behind.
These are facilities that we had been led to believe by CDC were eligible for the Federal Pharmacy Partnership Program, and in fact had been signed up. As you indicated, they were signed up and many of them were canceled out of the program. We spent the first 2 or 3 weeks of the vaccine rollout basically trying to argue with CDC about that point. And at the point that we discovered that we were getting nowhere, we entered into contracts with various vaccine providers, including, I believe, Safeway Albertsons, to begin working through that population. It has been a scramble to try to cover these folks, not having expected to have to at the beginning. And so it is a little bit difficult right now for them to find out what the details are, but they will get vaccinated. We will ensure that every one of these adult foster care facilities gets a visit and is able to schedule vaccinations. It's just going to take us a little bit.
All right, so finally, you heard we do have some clarity. And we told you yesterday that the Portland VA did offer to vaccinate Ray Hare. He's the World War II veteran that we've been telling you about. And I learned that Mary's Woods, that's a larger long-term care facility, called Gina Roberts to help get the other people living in Gina Roberts' home, like Carol here and everyone else, the vaccine. So we're wrapping up the week, Maggie, with some positive news, some offers to help and a promise by the state. I mean, you heard Pat Allen, to get everyone in adult care vaccinated. And I'll stay on top of it.
Yeah, we know you will. And seriously, if you need some aspirin or like an ice pack or something, because I would have been ramming my head against a wall with all the phone calls you've been making, but it's produced results. So hats off to you, but you have to be in pain.
Hey, it's worth it. And if you have a problem, we definitely want to hear from you. All you have to do is use everyone's favorite hashtag, HeyDan.
All right, Kristen, thank you. Seriously, she has to be in pain. It's insane. Okay, so we get tons of vaccine questions from you every single night, and it makes sense. The rollout has been really confusing, to say the least, for a lot of people, including for us. So speaking of beating your head against a wall, it's a violent week here at KGW. Pat Doris has been graciously manning the vaccine beat for us since day one. So we just sent him some of your questions.
Well, it's Friday and we have some really good questions here on the COVID vaccine, so here we go. First is from Kathleen, who basically asks, are there COVID shots left over at the end of the day at the convention center? And if so, is there a way to sign up and get on a call list to get a shot? It's a great question. And the answer is pretty much no. I checked with the folks who are running the place just for you, and they said that things are scheduled really tightly, and they may have an occasional no-show or somebody who needs to reschedule, and so their count gets off. But at the end of the day, they said they may have 4 or 5 doses, if any, left over. And if that's the case, they give those to volunteers who were there at the center. So, nah, unfortunately, there's not a sign-up list for that. All right, moving on to Candace. Will the OHA state provide enough time for the majority of seniors to get vaccinations before opening up appointment slots to the next priority groups? That is a question I've heard from a lot of people, especially seniors who are in the 75 to 80 category, saying, it's so hard to navigate these websites, and when things open up in the Portland area, there's lots of people trying to go for not that many times, and it's a lot of pressure. And why do we have these artificial timelines? There's no magic time about why 70-year-olds are going to become eligible Monday, and a week later why 65-year-olds. There's no medical reason for that. And there's hundreds of thousands in the 75 and above category that still have not gotten their shots. Well, because I like that question so much, Candace, I asked the governor that directly today, and basically she said, no, we're not going to stop. Patrick Allen, the health director, said people who are in line are expecting to be able to come eligible when we said they could, and because of that, we're not going to change. Which doesn't make a ton of sense to me, because the whole idea of having 80-year-olds and 75-year-olds prioritizes, because those are the people who die the most from this thing. So it seems like you'd want to get as many of those people covered as possible before you move on to the next groups. But I'm not running the state. So that's a long-winded way to say, no, they're not going to change that. All right, hope that helps.
Pat's not running the state. I love it. Pat, thank you. All right, it's time now for our daily vaccine count check-in with our Giant graphics, they're quite large. As of this afternoon, more than 517,000 Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose of the vaccine. That's about 12% of the state's population with at least one shot, and a lot of them have gotten their second dose. All right, over to Washington now. They update their vaccine numbers 3 times a week. So as of yesterday, that's the most recent update, more than 885,000 people have gotten at least their first dose, which works out to about 11.7% of that state's population.
We've been keeping tabs on COVID outbreaks in state prisons ever since Dan got a letter from a woman in Coffee Creek pleading for more protection from the pandemic. So now that a judge is ordering Oregon to vaccinate inmates, let's check back in. And we're taking a look back into the KGW Vault at something you probably remember if you lived on East Burnside in the 70s.
When United Flight 173 landed, the ground shook and windows rattled.
When the story continues.
Welcome back, everybody. My producer was just telling me about a comment that we're going to read at the end of the show. It was pretty funny. So keep sending in your questions and your comments and your feedback. Funny, serious. We want all of it. We're reading them throughout the show, clearly. You can email the story at kgw.com or go on Twitter and use the hashtag HeyDan. We love it all. And by the way, we have a new way for you to connect with us. We're launching the Story newsletter. Dun, 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 dun. Next week. Sorry for the music. It's going to be full of all the stuff that you've missed on the show. If you miss a night, that's fine. Plus, it'll have some of the stuff that we can't fit in every night. And we have an easy way, by the way, for you to subscribe. Just text STORY, just STORY, STORY, to the number on your screen, 503-226-5088. And then we'll send you back a link where you can sign up. All right, if you've been watching the show for a while, you know that we really like to follow through on the topics that we cover, even when they kind of leave the news cycle. And for the past month, we've spent a lot of time talking about COVID in prisons. And that sparked when Dan got a package in the mail from a woman at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. That's Oregon's only women's prison. She sent him those sketches. They're incredible. They show inmates wearing masks. And then she sent a letter talking about how people in prisons need to be protected, regardless of the crimes that put them there. And she's right. And not just because it's the humane thing to do, but also because most of the biggest outbreaks in Oregon are happening in state prisons. And earlier this month, a federal judge ordered the state to start vaccinating people in custody. So we sent Galen Etlin to get an update on how that's going.
It has been hard.
Ali Freeman's son is serving time at Eastern Oregon Correctional Institution. He just got his first dose of the COVID vaccine.
Must be kind of a relief.
Yes.
Oregon prisons have consistently been sites of the state's largest coronavirus outbreaks. More than 40 inmates have died. Allie hasn't been able to see her son in about a year.
We don't have any visits or anything of that nature.
The Oregon Department of Corrections, or ODOC, vaccinated about 5,000 inmates before last week's storm.
We have work to do, but we've done a lot of good.
Dr. Warren Roberts is Chief Medical Officer with ODOC.
What has the acceptance rate been like among inmates and staff?
Higher than our flu vaccine rates.
He says about 80% of people in the prison system are opting to get the COVID shot. Juan Chavez is an attorney with the advocacy group Oregon Justice Resource Center, which helped file a lawsuit to get those vaccines to inmates.
Our Constitution says we cannot cruelly and unusually punish people.
And a judge agreed.
We have an obligation to protect the people that we've taken into our custody.
Your comments poured in after that. Many upset inmates have vaccine access while other vulnerable Oregonians wait.
They're crammed like sardines in a can.
Layla Braunberger camps out in Oregon from Colorado on visits to her incarcerated husband. She says vaccine access is about humanity.
But you shouldn't think, oh, they deserve to die. Nobody deserves to die.
Lower spread in prisons can help staff, too.
And they're less likely to infect their family, their loved ones, and their neighbors. We're all in this together.
So opting in is crucial. Advocates say vaccine education is the key.
Making sure the option is presented with context.
Precisely. A lot of folks on the inside may still want that vaccine if they understood its benefits, its efficacy, and its safety.
How are you working to bridge institutional distrust?
We have to engage and we have to educate. And that's the way that you build trust.
Those who opt out meet with health providers to explain their hesitancy. ODOC provides pamphlets and videos to ease fears.
And that also increases our acceptance rate.
Most who want the vaccine will have their first dose by the end of next week. As for Allie Freeman,
there's a lot of people that have been separated from their loved ones and even lost a lot of loved ones.
She's thankful for her son's health with hope. to see him soon. Galen Etlin, KGW News.
All right, we know a lot of you watching at home lost your power last weekend. Hopefully it's back on now. And obviously if it's not, you're not watching anyway. But after the ice storm brought down a lot of power lines, a lot of you asked us, why don't they just put those lines underground? Why don't the utility companies do that? Well, the short answer from PGE is that it would just cost way too much, and underground power doesn't automatically fix everything. And then some of you followed up telling us, that's true, because you live through it. Like Gary, who wrote in and said, hey, Dan, saw your story about underground utilities. Of all the places I've lived, and there have been many, the place that had the least reliable power was a city with underground utilities. I kept a calendar to track power outages, and they averaged, look at this, between 1 to 2 per month. Gary, thank you. Peggy also tweeted, hey, Dan, I have underground power in Bethany in a 42-year-old house, which must have been pioneering. It's wonderful until the transformer blew and PGE had to dig up my side yard to replace it. That said, they did put sod back down when they were done. That's very nice. All right, now you may remember we also talked about this issue last summer when some power lines in the Santiam Canyon sparked the massive Beachy Creek fire. And it's a big topic right now in Texas as well, where the power grid essentially failed during a huge, unprecedented winter storm. So I talked to the director of power planning for the Northwest Power and Conservation Council about what we can learn from these kinds of natural disasters.
It seems totally within reason that we here in this region could also experience something that is outside, our historic experience of weather. And that's a new paradigm for how we plan the system. You need to be prepared for something that goes beyond that historic experience. The weather events, even as extreme as we have had them, might not be what we need to be prepared for. And that's a learning that I think everyone in the entire, frankly, country, and maybe even to some extent the world, is taking away from the circumstances that are going on right now. And it's a shift in paradigm. It is definitely moving away from the way that people have planned in the past.
So we're going to focus more on power grid issues here and in Texas and compare the two next week on The Story. So let me know if you have any questions that you want us to answer. You can always use that hashtag #HeyDan. And we love when you send us suggestions for the KGW Vault. We love the Vault. It gives us a great excuse to dig through our archives, and they're huge. And Charisse, go Charisse. She sent us this one from the Vault. She wrote, how about a story on the plane that crash landed in the 70s on/near Burnside? Yowza, that's an awesome idea. So that crash happened back in 1978 at 157th and East Burnside. You were right. And it was right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So we found a story in the KGW Vault from 1998 looking back at the crash on its 20th anniversary.
People who heard the crash say they also felt it. When United Flight 173 landed, the ground shook and windows rattled. Immediately, the frenzy to rescue survivors began. It was December 28, 1978, around 6:15 p.m.
I smelled this funny smell like WD-40 and dirt and everything, and I didn't know if we were dead or alive.
This passenger was one of 179 people to survive. 10 people, including 3 children, died. Amy Ford Connor did not know anyone had lost their lives when she walked out of the wreck. She was 17.
Some ways it feels like it was just, last month. And then sometimes it feels like it never happened at all.
Connor has repressed the memories of the moments when the plane hit the ground, but she can never forget what could have been.
It's twofold. Of course, the most immediate is they died. And I was a part of that. And the other piece is that it could have been me.
20 years later, Connor has discovered her therapies for coping, from spinning cloth to speaking frankly about her story. She remains haunted, though, in other ways. It has been 14 years since she has flown in a plane.
I tried everything from self-hypnosis to biofeedback to Valium, Seconal. And I was miserable. It was just awful. Physical symptoms, not just emotional.
20 years has also erased all signs of the crash at 157th and East Burnside. But Connor is now working to revive memories of this scene. She has organized a reunion for Monday. 150 to 200 people are expected.
But I felt a need to be with people who were there, who can share my story, and to hear their stories, to see how they're doing. I just wanted to see if anybody else wanted to come.
Tina Kim, KGW Northwest News, Channel 8.
It's so incredible to see. So Popular Mechanics listed this as one of the 12 plane crashes that changed aviation because it led to some big changes in airline safety, mostly with how the cockpit crew is managed. You see, the plane was supposed to land at PDX, but it had trouble with its landing gear, and then it ran out of fuel while it was circling, so the cockpit crew was blamed for not paying enough attention to the fuel running out. So after that crash, the NTSB started recommending cockpit resource management training, which is now standard for all airline crews. All right, keep sending us those suggestions with the hashtag HeyDan. You can email the story at kgw.com. I've read a few of your comments, and we're going to read a few on the air when we finish the story right after this. I love your comments so much. We don't have a lot of time tonight, but we have a couple. People have been writing in, multiple people, and saying that they want to see Pat Doris run for governor because he joked that he doesn't run the state, but he's already got at least one vote for governor. So we'll pass it along and see what Pat says. And then Armando wrote in and said, "Hey Dan, I see you're not on the story today. Are you in Cancun?" Yikes. Armando, thank you for your email, and thank you everybody for watching. That was the story on this Friday. Stick around though. The news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter is coming up next.